This is Let's Talk Business with your host, Marc Ebinger. Now, here's Marc.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Business Podcast. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. It's one of my favorite topics of all time. In studio with us today is Jeff Ye, the owner of Security 101 here in San Antonio. Jeff holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and an MBA in Strategic Management and Marketing from Rice University's Jones Graduate School of Business. Over the past decade, Jeff has amassed experience across various industries, including co-founding an oil and gas technology company and later serving as the head of sales and equity partner for a T-Mobile partner company, where he led a marketing team of 700 people. In May of 2019, he opened the San Antonio franchise of Security 101, marking the fourth office in Texas. Beyond his business endeavors, Jeff is passionate about investing in and growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem right here in San Antonio. And in his free time, he likes to do some Olympic weightlifting. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a heck of a resume. I feel stupid now. I feel less smart than I did when I walked in here. So
it's a lot of words on paper.
It is, right? But it's a heck of a resume. So I appreciate you being here. I'm your host, Marc Ebinger, the CEO of Kruka's Virtual Staffing, a company that recruits and staffs experienced overseas administrative assistants for insurance agents and attorneys. So if you're curious about the most common tasks that virtual assistants are doing for businesses, head over to our website at krukas.com and grab a list of the top 20 tasks that VAs are doing for businesses like yours. The link is in the podcast description.
And I'm your co-host, Jenevy Sims with the Evolve Firm, where we help business owners create branding strategies to help evolve and elevate their business to that next level.
Yeah, and you're also on the BPSA board here in San Antonio. You guys got a pretty cool event coming up in March. What's going on?
Yes, we are so excited. We have our March networking event happening on March 12th at 5:30 at Amelia Social Lounge, which is that beautiful location down at the Creamery, still brand new. And this month we are featuring the nonprofit called YES, which is Youth Entrepreneurship Services. They're a brand new nonprofit that helps young adults do exactly what we love to do, which is entrepreneurship, talking about it and helping them build it from ground up, because, that's where everything is happening. Our youth are the ones that's now taking on the flame and carrying it on now to their next level here in San Antonio. And this is exactly what that that nonprofit is doing. So we are so excited and honored to have them. Make sure to go bpsaevents.com to register. $10 at the door goes directly to that nonprofit. So I'd love for you guys, whether you're just starting out in your networking journey or you're a seasoned networker, please come out and join us.
And I think that's so important, because how many of us have said at one time or another, if we only knew what we're learning now as teenagers when we didn't have to pay rent.
I said it yesterday.
Right?
I said it yesterday to my wife when we were out on a walk.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I wasn't even exposed to it in today's shifting landscape of business and entrepreneurship and even jobs. It's not get a 9-to-5 and your fate is secured forever anymore. It's just as risky as being an entrepreneur these days, with layoffs and everything. So excited to see them at the event.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love for you guys to meet them.
All right. Well, and I am Heather Rose Boehme. I'm a certified business coach and owner of Onset Professional Development, where we focus on mapping processes for entrepreneurs and organizations so that they can more easily delegate tasks, train staff, and scale their business up to the next level.
Yeah, in fact, we're launching another business right now, and it's like I will not launch any business or do anything without process mapping. Is one of the once you kind of get the general idea what you want to do and you've got a good partnership or whatever in place, you got to map it so you know what's going on. That is
you have to see it visually.
I feel strongly about making things visual. And if you're like a newer business or you have a really simple business, I actually just put up a YouTube video kind of walking you through how to start mapping your processes, because not everybody can afford to hire a consultant to come in. And usually when they can, their business is so big, it's overwhelming. So I then have to come in and kind of help pull everybody out of the chaos that is their operation. So if you can do this from the get, oh my gosh, it's so much simpler, it's easier, and it makes knowing which staff member to hire next way easier to bring them on and to train them. So check that out. It's at Onset Pro Heather on YouTube. And I just put it up yesterday, so it's fresh.
Love it. Highly recommended. All right, a quick reminder to follow the Let's Talk Business podcast on all major podcast platforms and social media, where you can catch video version of the show. You can get to everything easily from our website at satalkradio.com. Now, coming up on March 27th, we've got the next Let's Talk Business Mega Mixer coming up here in San Antonio. Tickets are on sale now for just $20. It's a huge expo-style mixer. So this is the way to do mixers. Like, I think I have cracked the code on mixers.
Yes, you have.
Because you get vendor tables there, so you're drawing in additional revenue. You get people, other businesses involved. They're inviting their circles. But the thing is, when people come in, it kind of overcomes some of that awkwardness that can be the start of a mixer. When you got vendor tables there, you go right up there, hey, tell me about what you do. And before you know it, you're making contacts and all that. So this is all B2B type stuff here. So love these expo-style mixers. There's going to be great snacks and plenty of drinks. There's going to be margaritas and beer as well. So plenty of alcohol as the social lubricant to have a good time. that term.
Sounds
The
so
margaritas.
Net proceeds from the event are going to be going to support multiple nonprofit charities here in the San Antonio area that are all vetted and really, really good charities. Now, we're expecting to sell out again, so please get your tickets ahead of time. You can get to everything easily from our website at satalkradio.com. I think we still have maybe one or two vendor booths left, so if you're out there listening to this and want to be get a vendor table and be a sponsor for the event, then just reach out and let us know. Now, a quick shout out to Nate Keir and his team at True Blue Home Services for being a gold sponsor for the upcoming Let's Talk Business Mega Mixer on March 27th. Based in San Antonio, True Blue Home Services specializes in comprehensive house care solutions, including handyman repairs, carpentry, yard work, seasonal services, and minor home renovations. Now, they're dedicated to helping busy adults and seniors maintain their homes, ensuring a safe and comfortable living environment. They're heavily involved in the senior community, making sure that they do some nonprofit stuff there too, where people, if they've had some kind of life event happen and they need to equip their home with bars and ramps and things like that, they're there to help do that. Highly recommended. I've known Nate for about 2 years now. Great guy, great company. So if you're looking for reliable and professional home maintenance services, be sure to check them out at truebluehome.com or call them at 726-200-9876. All right, Jeff, excited to have you here. So we had a short-term cancellation, and I think Jenevy, right, was able to get you to come on. So that's awesome. I appreciate you being here on short notice. Having said that, I was out in the Caribbean while you guys were doing the prep Zoom, so there's some things I had to kind of try and catch up on. But tell me a little bit about your background and how that led you to where you're at now with your franchise at Security 101.
Sure. I think it starts when I was growing up as a kid. My father was a serial entrepreneur. Did well. We moved across the country and the world. Through his businesses, and I tell people I remember we would always wait for him for dinner, and I'd tell people I always remember we wouldn't eat dinner until 7:30 every single night, and as a kid I thought that was fairly normal because I didn't know any other way. Now as an adult I look back and go, wow, my dad worked really hard, and grew up in that business environment. Always knew I was going to chase business, didn't know where, how, when, but that led me to where I am and my passions here as an adult. So took a lot of business type, sales type jobs coming out of college. And then the first company I co-founded was an oil and gas technology company in Houston, Texas. I co-founded that with three of my peers and friends during business school at Rice. And that was the first company. We started with nothing, except a great idea and a passion, and hired some developers and brought on some interns and grew something from literally nothing. Something we talked about over a couple of beers one night, and it grew into something where biggest companies like GE Oil and Gas and Halliburton signed letters of intent for us. So we were pretty proud and pretty happy. Unfortunately, that company did not pan out. Took an executive job with a small little organization called T-Mobile, and that introduced me to that brought me to Los Angeles, California. Introduced me to some of the biggest players and entrepreneurs over there, and I was brought on and as head of sales and an equity partner for a T-Mobile partner company. Had direct conversations with the owner. The goal was to get acquired, and we had certain KPIs we had to accomplish to hit a point where valuation maximization was the ideal. That did get acquired successfully, and once done, took the capital that I earned and came back to Texas to start Security 101 here in San Antonio. That was about 6 years ago, and here we are today.
So it sounds like you've, gone through and overcome so many things. Like your first company didn't work out, then you got the sales job, but then you got the equity partnership and you sold that. So that's a big success. But all of that up and down sounds like it was hard work, exhausting, emotionally trying, lots of ups and downs. So what drove you through that, all the way through that exit to where you ultimately succeeded? What was it that kept you going?
You know, it was a desire to see things through to the end, whatever that end looked like. And you're right. Entrepreneurship is super hard. It's grueling. It's lonely. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. A lot of sleepless nights. But you know, I tell a lot of folks, aspiring entrepreneurs, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And you know, the success pool would be diluted, and it wouldn't be as lucrative or as glamorous as it could be, as it is. So you know, I think of it as a self-filtering process, and I like to tell myself that I'm not going to be the one that gets filtered out.
And as you do this, you learn as you go. So the first one may be a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Second one, it can be less, and the third, and so forth. And I think this is what ultimately has led you into the angel investing stuff that you're doing as well. You're looking to help, and help the ecosystem here in San Antonio, right? I mean, you're looking to give back, but you're also looking for opportunity as you go through that, right?
Absolutely. I'm in a stage of my life in my career where in the past I would help aspiring entrepreneurs through guidance, mentorship, advice, coaching, and I still do so now, but I'm in a stage of life and career where I can also help aspiring entrepreneurs by capital investment, and that's a win-win situation for them and for me. If they succeed as I invest as I think they will, then obviously that's a monetary investment and a return for me. But again, it's a great way to allocate capital and resources to the groups that need cash to kick off, to grow, to accelerate, to drive sales, to drive production, to drive marketing. It's a great way to reinvest all of the lessons, the time, and the resources I've learned and earned and gained over the last decade into something I truly care about.
And let's clarify what you love to do here. So there's different parts of growing a company and selling it, right? First of all, I think everybody should know what you want to do with your company when you get started. But oftentimes the first company you get involved with, you're not even thinking like that, right? You're just going out there and doing stuff. But certainly if you've got a little bit of experience in this, you're going to be looking at things that way. So, but there's different phases. So there's kind of like the startup, there's the mid-level, and then there's like the huge company stuff. But you like the startup phase. So talk about a little bit about the startup side of it. And then as far as that being your build out and why you love that part of it.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned everyone needs to know what they're doing with it. I always tell folks, start a company with the end in mind. Reverse engineer the product.
That's what Heather always says.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
But it's easy to say that, but when I'm speaking from my own personal journey, it's like, it's like the Joker from Batman. He's like, I'm just a dog chasing cars, and I wouldn't even know what to do with one if I caught it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like some people are like that when they get started with their entrepreneurial journey. I know I was. It was like I'm just figuring it out and going or whatever. I didn't have the end in mind, but certainly if you can take a deep breath, maybe start there, you're way ahead of the game. But certainly if you've been in it a while, you can always adjust too. You say, you know what? let me just slow down a minute. Let me get Heather to come help me map my business, and let me figure out, let's make this a sellable thing. Because even if you're like, I want to keep it forever, no, it doesn't always work out that way. You may end up like becoming like something happens, sickness or death or whatever. Things can happen, and maybe your kids don't want the company or your wife doesn't want any part of it. So setting it up to sell, I think, is always a good idea, even if you don't plan on selling.
So you run into a lot of startups and new investing companies that companies you're looking to invest in, right? So what is your general advice or way you guide them when you find them not having that end goal in mind?
Wait, we were in the middle of that
finished.
other
Oh,
question.
sorry, finishing the sentence.
Yeah. So the why you love the startup phase, and then just maybe kind of identifying a little bit about that startup phase itself, so people are clear on what that is.
Absolutely. There are multiple, and I can't remember which book, but there's a good entrepreneurial book that articulates this fabulously. But there are multiple stages in business growth and business operations. The startup phase is where you're grinding, you're hustling. The founders, the co-founders, the initial employees, they're the ones doing everything. They are the accounting team. They are the marketing team. They're standard mom and pops. When you hear about folks wearing all hats, that's the startup phase. You're starting from nothing and growing that into something. At some point, whether it's a revenue metric, whether it's an operational metric, whether it's a people metric, at some point the company will be large enough that the original leadership and the founding team just cannot possibly do everything. It just doesn't work. There's not enough time in the day, and it becomes super inefficient.
I've heard it say the team you start with isn't the one you end with necessarily, right?
It's true.
So there is a very well-known gap in the entrepreneurial world and this is where a lot of founders have trouble navigating, because in their DNA, they are entrepreneurs, but now they've got to learn to trust and let go. So there is this well-known gap in the entrepreneurial and business growth world where the once startup, quote unquote startup, now transitions into a mid to larger enterprise. And that's when processes need to take place. That's when maybe middle management needs to be hired. That's when consulting services need to come in and restructure organizations. That's when higher level systems and implementations need to be executed on and adopted so that things can work a little more autonomously. That gap and that transition is notoriously difficult to navigate, and it is one where it is a necessary one where startups become larger enterprises. I personally love operating in the startup space because I like the hustle. I like the grind. I like working with like-minded folks who pour everything into the organization. I have worked with and I've helped transition some organizations through that valley, and I have worked on the other side as a corporate citizen as well. Through the experiences, through the wins, the failures, the good times, the bad times, I've learned that I am most happy in probably the first quarter, the startup phase, maybe into the first quarter of the gray area, the valley area, if you will. After that, I start losing a little more joy. And Mark, to your point, there are very different processes. Maybe the founding team isn't geared to take that into the next level, and that's where there are very, very good corporate people who come in and then run with a middle organization and then scale that into a much, much larger enterprise. So there are people very, very well suited at very specific parts of the job, and taking corporations from one point to the next. So as you start analyzing, the largest companies in the world, the Fortune 100, all the way down to startups, you'll find repeated names in the corporate sector. They will take a large failing organization, turn it into something successful sell that off into something else, and then they will rinse and repeat, and that is their career because they are very good at that. On the flip side of that, and this is kind of like me, there are people who are fairly good at taking something from nothing, taking an idea into reality, taking a concept into execution up to a certain level, and then having the self-awareness to say, I'm not having fun anymore. And then allowing others who are very, very good at that sector come in and run with it for longer.
Well, and you kind of shortcutted the process a little bit by going into a franchise. So you're looking to grow out. What's your time span on Security 101 you're looking at?
I up plus or minus, whether it's franchise or startup, or I typically have a plus or minus 7-year process.
Gotcha.
And like I mentioned earlier, understand the end and then reverse engineer the process. I like to grow for about 5 years. Year 6, we start looking at due diligence. We start looking at if acquisition is a goal, we start looking at acquisition targets. We start looking at exploring some of those connections. And by year 7, the financial due diligence has been done. Contracts are negotiated, processes are set, and then maybe the transition out period has started.
So does that mean you're doing due diligence right now?
You're in that phase. That's where you're at.
I was like, how many years since 2019?
There are the politically correct answer. The diplomatic answer to that is considerations are already on.
Well, you got to have like all right, so let me back up just a little bit and say, how do you know when your company's ready to sell?
Great question. If you ask 10 different people that, you will get 10 different answers. The way I look at it is so if you have a lot of experience in mergers and acquisitions, you will know that there is a point where valuation can be theoretically maximized. You've hit all the KPIs. You know what the acquirers are going to pay money for, and you know what the important areas of your businesses are to be acquired. So when you do your financial analysis of your own organization, you've seen that those KPIs have been maximized and they continue to be at an all-time high. That might be a good time to sell while it's high.
Hey, my last question on this thread here, because I know I'm monopolizing, sorry, but in my mind, I'm thinking I would actually know who I would want to acquire me. So is that something strategically that you're looking at as well?
Absolutely.
How do you then do you reach out? How does that happen? How do you end up making that connection or facilitating that in some way that they say, hey, maybe I want to buy Security 101?
Great question. That is a very good question. So part of the research and the analysis that goes into acquisition and starting with the end in mind is understanding who, before you even start an organization, understand who in the world might potentially acquire your company. Understand what that market looks like, what your competition looks like, what previous acquisitions have looked like. If there have been no exits in your space in that industry, maybe that's not a great industry to dive into. Everyone wants to be the first one, but being the first one is very difficult. However, if you look at an organization, you have goals to enter in a certain industry or a certain type of company. You've done your research, and you've seen that in the last decade there have been multiple $1 million, $1 billion exits of the same type of organization. That's a good indicator that this is a desirable field to go into. So, to your question, Mark, how do I know what the end looks like? That research was done before it was even started.
I'm sorry, but I love this topic. It's like, do you start a relationship with a business broker? Because that's what I'm thinking. I would be like, hey, and this is even making me rethink what I'm doing now, because obviously I think I should be, looking at my company as something that, formulating a good exit plan would be good because I can maximize the value of the company. It's always a good thing. But do you partner with a business broker to look that out, or do you do all the research on your own, or how does that work?
Great question again. So many different ways, and this is where I work with individual startups and founders in in how to evaluate what direction they want to go. Sometimes it's through investors. Sometimes it's through merger and acquisition brokers. There are pros and cons to everything. Sometimes it's direct reach out. Sometimes it's an avenue you may have never thought about. Sometimes it's purely networking and your circle of colleagues, peers, and friends. A lot of different ways to do that. In a very generic sense, I think all of those all of those methods are worth pursuing. If you
It's called the shotgun approach.
yeah, exactly. What comes in first? And
We'll just shoot from the hip with a shotgun and see what
Absolutely.
sticks.
Now, if you are a startup, and this is where, I know we'll talk about funding and financing and different and different types of way to get money. But if you're a startup and you're raising capital and you're working with angel investors and venture capitalists and private equity firms, they've got people, they've got resources on employment, they've got networks, they've got people they've worked with all day long, all year long, that they utilize and rely on for merger and acquisition purposes specifically. Investment bankers, that's their entire job, is to help with mergers and acquisition. So depending on what stage your organization at, depending on what industry your organization is in, depending on the selling history of organizations like yours, there are a lot of ways to go to market.
So speaking of the finances, let's talk about that, because I feel like there's kind of two polar thoughts on that. There's the people who kind of over rely on investing a little bit. They're like, I'm going to get somebody else, OPM, other people's money, and that's going to pay for everything. And they may sell off way too much equity in the initial start because it's very easy to do when you have nothing. And then there's the people who refuse to take investments because they don't want other people with their hands in the honey pot. They don't want to do that, and then it stunts their growth. So here's my question. If you were starting over today in the current landscape, you didn't have money from an exit, how would you go about navigating that?
That is the multi-million-dollar question many times. It's a fantastic topic. Once again, it's a very customized one based on where the organization is, what the founders are doing, what their history looks like, what backing they have. But I always like to sit down to. There are three main ways to raise money. One is debt, one is equity, and one is revenue backed. Pros and cons to each. You laid it out well. The pros to, well, let's start with cons. The cons with debt and getting loans and getting financing from banks and other lending programs. The cons of that is you've got to pay that back on a very regular, frequent basis with fairly high interest rates typically, because you're a very risky venture and very risky investment for debtors. The pro with debt is you're not releasing any equity. You are paying someone back, but you keep the shares of that business for yourself. Pros and cons with equity. Equity comes at a time where equity is cash injection by selling off or trading shares of your company that typically don't require consistent, frequent payments at high interest rates. However, the cons with equity is you are giving away shares of your business, which may not seem like a big deal when you have nothing, but when you've grown your organization to something big, those shares get very expensive to you and to your shareholders very quickly. And then finally, last one is a little biased, is a personal favorite of mine, the good old-fashioned bootstrapping. It's revenue-backed cash flow. So in this end, the pros with bootstrapping is you don't release any equity and you don't take on significant debt. So you spend money as you raise it. The cons and the downside of bootstrapping is you can't grow as fast as you would like to, because all of your spending and your operational costs and your cash flow is reliant on your ability to sell stuff and get revenue into the organization, you can't grow as quickly as you could if you took additional cash injections from debt or equity as well. So most organizations, they have some combination of all three. And to understand to really calculate the ideal mixture of all three takes a CFO degree and many years of financial analysis. So and even then there isn't a right answer, but there are, and any company requires cash to operate, and there are pros and cons with all three approaches.
So there's 30 million plus small businesses in America, right? And I think the statistics are that 85% of them will fail within the first 5 years. And most of, I hope that doesn't do anything. Is that what it's doing?
Yeah.
Okay, testing. Okay, we're good. I disconnected my mic. Whoops. Okay, so that's a high percentage of failure. And a lot of those 30 million business owners are not college educated. They didn't go get big degrees. They're just bootstrapping it from the beginning. What are some ways you suggest for them to educate themselves? Because I think at a certain level, you do need a CFO. You need to go to someone, but you need to know enough to know who to ask too. So do you have some good resources that you would recommend someone who's like, I need to get more educated on this, that they could go to learn more about that?
Absolutely. First of all, I do want to tell everyone out there, and I say this to the folks I talk to a lot: failure is not a failure. Failure is lessons learned. Failure is now I know what not to do the next time. Being resilient after failure is a success. My first organization, as high as it could have been, failed, and through that, a lot of lessons learned. Now, regarding what 85% businesses fail, absolutely, and I think there are a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons for early stage startup failure is cash flow. And that is very different from revenue. That is very different from asset balance and liabilities, assets and liabilities. That's very different from operating expenses, any fundraising or capital injections or cash sources. Simply managing what's in your bank account is the single most common reason for businesses to fail. I've known many organizations where they have a very healthy P&L, very healthy profit and loss statement. They're making more money than they spend, but because of some of the deals, some of the operational costs, they just do not have the cash in the bank account to continue operating, and that forces them to shut down. So, to your point, I absolutely think it's necessary for any founder or any executive to have some level of base finance and accounting education and background. Now, I'm not telling them to go back to college or get an MBA, but there are so many night classes out there, so many technical education classes, so many weekend programs. No one needs to be a certified no one needs to be a CFO or a CPA, but they do need to know a little bit about base finance and base accounting. So they know what revenue is. They know what cost of goods sold is. They know what EBITDA is. They know what if the difference between a fixed asset and a variable and variable one. They know the difference between fixed and variable costs. They know what a balance sheet is. They know what a cash flow statement is. They know what a P&L is. Those are some very, very fundamental skills, assets, and knowledge to understand in order to operate a healthy business.
And it's very important to have that. I know when I was what you would call an accidental entrepreneur. That wasn't in my plan ever. It just kind of happened. And then that preparation of it, that's when I found out about these government programs to help educate you and kind of incubate you into that entrepreneurship journey. And I'm so excited to have you on the show and talking about this, because as we were talking about that exit strategy, I was that entrepreneur that did not have an exit strategy. I honestly just want my son to take it. But now, 15 years later, I'm starting to see that he doesn't want to take that same path. So what do I do? And 15 years, and only now I'm starting to get questions about, are you ready to sell? Asking, okay, we're actually interested in purchasing your company. And so now these are real conversations and things that I have to talk about, of course, with my attorney and my CPA. But as an entrepreneur, I never really thought about that. So I'm still learning a lot, in this journey. The other thing that I love to point out also is that you're an Olympic weightlifter. And that takes massive discipline. That's discipline on your body, just your mental, and your way of thinking. And that's something that I see you also translate into business and also into your personal life too, to have that kind of discipline, to be able to do that, which is so extraordinary. And I just want you to kind of share how you kind of work the two together and how this has kind of inspired you and the lessons you've learned from being an Olympic weightlifter.
I love that comparison. You're right. So I'll quickly clarify. I am recreationally competitive in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. I wish I was. I'm not an Olympic athlete. Yeah, that I do. Yeah. I do know some of the folks who do train at that level, and they are some impressive people. But I do love the comparison in fitness and in business. Both require discipline. In fact, without discipline, one can only operate on inspiration for so long before it turns into mundane routine. Right. So that's where discipline and work ethic kick in. I share that with a lot of folks a lot because it's the old adage people like to talk about. If you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. No, that is complete. Can I swear?
Yeah.
That is complete bullshit. You can do something you love. It will quickly turn into something you do not love. Unless there is the idea there and the knowledge going into it that this is a job. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what industry you go into. It doesn't matter what fitness program you sign up for. If you don't have the work ethic and the discipline to do what needs to be done on a daily basis, whether you want to do it or not, it's going to fail. No amount of consulting or advice or guidance can solve discipline or work ethic issues.
That's right.
Now, have you read the book, The One Thing?
I have not.
Okay, so there's a key point in that book, and it's basically that discipline is in short supply. Like, you only have so much discipline, no matter who you are, but discipline can be cultivated by habits. So if you get in the habit of doing disciplined things, start small, they build up into larger disciplines. So you don't start by working out for an hour every day. You start by working out, go for a walk for 5 minutes, and you do that every single day until all of a sudden it becomes 10, all of a sudden it becomes 20, right? So is that how the intense discipline that you're showing now that has allowed you to accomplish all these things, is that how it started? And if so, what are some of those habits?
Absolutely. I completely agree. It is a habitual thing. When people ask me how I have the time or the energy to go train 2 hours a day every 4 or 5 days a week, I often tell them, I don't think of weightlifting and training as something I should do. I think of it like dinner. It's not about if I'm going to eat dinner tonight. It's about when and how do I fit that into my schedule and what I'm going to eat. It's a given quantity within my daily life, my daily routine. Same thing with things in business and things with entrepreneurial. You've got to make the things you've got to do a daily quantity. It's not a questionable. Do I feel like doing this today? It's when do I fit this productive activity into my day today? Because I know I have to get it done.
And where did you start? Because you didn't start by working out 2 hours a day. Just like in whether it's fitness, training, or business, start small. A lot of people ask me what the difference is. They ask me questions about entrepreneurship, and I always say the difference between dreamers
and entrepreneurs is execution. The dreamers will sit there and think they've got the next $1 billion idea, and then the entrepreneurs will actually go do something about it. So start small. It's, for the technical and the folks out there and engineers out there, it's Newton's first law of motion. Objects that stay at rest, stay at rest. Objects in motion, stay in motion. So if you're moving, if you're rolling, if you keep the rhythm going, in my head, when you think about, I know this is a bit of a tangent, but if you think about dragon boat racing or those boat racing, there's that guy in the back that just beats the drum constantly to keep pace. It's not fast, it's not slow, it's just a rhythmic boom, 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 boom. In the back of my head, every single day, I have that drum beat going. And it's the idea that I know that if that flame ever extinguished, that drum stopped beating, it's significantly harder to get started again than it is to just keep going.
Speaking of starting, so a lot of younger entrepreneurs are going to be our audience, right? So for somebody who is beginning a startup, not a franchise, but you could include franchise in this, but it's like, what's their number one job? What is the most important thing that this new entrepreneur needs to do?
Great question. I would say, to your point, I would say plan with the end in mind. I can't understand how important that is.
Day-to-day operation.
Sure.
What is there? I mean, because obviously planning to exit and all those things. You got to do that. But it's like day in and day out, because they're going to be job owners most likely when they first start out. What's the most important thing they need to be doing?
So absolutely, and again, I frame it as start with the end in mind, reverse engineer backwards. So if you want to start whatever company and the goal is for acquisition in X amount of years, you want to reverse engineer that backwards. Well, I know I'm selling this company. I want to maximize how much I get for it. These are the metrics that matter in order to grow my acquisition amount and make more money. So what do I need to do today, and what do I need to do this year to increase these three specific metrics or three specific KPIs to maximize my valuation, so that when I sell in whatever many years, I will make the most money that I possibly can. Reverse engineer that backwards down to the day. So today, for new entrepreneurs, the reverse engineering process might be down to, well, I've got to have a product. If I'm in a service business, then I've got to have a service. I've got to have my first customer. I've got to hire. If I'm going into an industry I have no experience in, I've got to find my first skilled partner or my first skilled hire. So to your point, Mark, that changes with every situation. But if an entrepreneur has a great dream that they want to turn into reality, step one, go generate sales. Go see if someone wants to buy whatever you're selling.
That's where I was going, is like, because it's the lifeblood of any business is going to be cash flow, right?
Absolutely.
Which sales isn't always cash flow, to your point you were making earlier, right? Where it's accounts receivable in 30, 60, 90 days or whatever, but you got to pay your lights and electricity and your employees today. But focusing on sales, right? So, but what about an entrepreneur who doesn't like sales?
Oh, I love that question. There's so many of them. They're especially coming from an engineering background. I've worked with and trying to talk people off the ledge, but there are so many technical engineers that think if they build something, people will buy it. That is completely untrue. There needs to be a level of sales, marketing, design, customer adaptation, customer acceptance. And as an angel investor, one of the things I look for in a startup that I potentially invest in is team dynamic, is founder culture, and the their founder group and their advisors, their board members. If they are super technical founder, do they have what it takes to be a CEO? Do they have what it takes to do fundraising? Do they have what it takes to go sell stuff? If not, do they have the emotional maturity to say, I'm not the CEO. I love what I do. I want to found this company, but I'm not the CEO. I'm not the person who goes out, sells stuff, and holds that role. So to answer your question, Mark, if the CEO is not the type of person to go do sales, then they need to quickly understand that they need to find somebody to go do sales. That can be in the form of a hire, that can be in the form of an equity partner, that can be in the form of a co-founder, but they need to quickly understand that where their strengths and their opportunities are, and then capitalize on their strengths, but plug up their opportunities.
Yeah, I like that answer. And so, like me, I'm comfortable in sales and networking and all that, right? So when you have somebody that is in all of that, that's revenue generating, right? Obviously, I'm in the virtual staffing business, right? So administrative functions are easy to plug. It's like, this is not complicated. So I have this philosophy that the number one job of someone like myself, who's comfortable in sales and networking and all that, and being the rainmaker, right, is to offload every single thing that you can offload to get out of the way so that I can focus almost exclusively on that and, of course, growing the business. So if you have somebody that's that way, like me, get rid of the administrative load. Do you agree or disagree?
100% agree. 100% agree. Takes experience and takes growth, and it takes a lot of emotional maturity to be able to say, this is what I'm really good at. I want to spend all of my resources doing this because this will generate the most return on investment. Everything else can be secondary. Everything else because I'm not good at it. So if I'm really good at something, it takes me less time, less effort, and I enjoy something more. Then if I did something I wasn't good at, it would take double the time, it would take double the resources, take double the effort, and life would not be fun. So that's when, to your point, find ways to offload that somewhere else, whether it's a third-party contractor. From a marketing standpoint, you don't need to do all the marketing yourself if you have great people in your network who are very, very good at that and do this every single day and are super efficient. Right? If you're a business owner, sometimes you're inundated with the daily routines, and you need a fresh perspective on how things are running and the inefficiencies, and that's where you hire and bring on third-party consultants and business coaches, because someone who has been in the business from day one and has dips their hands in it every single day will not see things the same way as someone who comes in with fresh eyes.
So I want to kind of touch on something that you said there. So you said it requires growth. And I think most people, when they hear that, they default to business growth of revenue, growth of size. But from what I'm hearing, it's growth of self-awareness, growth of the clarity around what you are good at. And I think a lot of people, they skip over that. They're like, if I just have more money, then I can hire everybody to do everything, and I don't need to grow myself. So what are some of the ways you recommend people to grow as people and grow that self-awareness so they can grow their business?
Ooh, that takes a much smarter person than me to answer that question.
No.
So how do you do it?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
You got to grow your network. Yeah. And I've learned that tremendously from this show. It's like, this is a networking show, basically, where I meet all kinds of people and learn, because you don't know what you don't know. You've got to expand your network and create new friendships.
That's true. And you have to also be able to be willing to let go. A lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, they're like, this is my business. This is my idea. This is my baby. And so that stunts your growth.
Yeah, that's a good way to not be able to take a vacation.
Exactly. And we all need vacations. I mean, look at his glow. You got to have that, right?
Yeah, I got a little tan.
Look at this tan. So I know for me as an entrepreneur, as a mom and a wife, and, it's hard to let go of that control. But then when I had a couple of great mentors in my life early on in my business, they were like, you need to let that go and delegate. Focus on what you do best and hire, so that in that way you can expand and scale. Because if you don't accept the fact that you are not going to do everything, and that, you're actually stopping the process and the success of, you're in your own way. And if a business owner kind of just learns how to zoom out of that picture And then you can kind of start piecing the puzzle together. Like, this person is great at marketing, this person is great at this part, and you start creating a bigger picture. Then you can be able to grow your business in a way that you can go ahead and sell it in the way that you need to.
You know, we're about out of time, but one of the things that I would have liked to have talked about a little bit more is how do you decide as far as personality types and where that person is at in their journey, whether or not you would invest in their company, because it's like, you're not, I've seen it on Shark Tank. We all have, I'm sure. It's like, you're not there yet. It's like, I don't want to go on this journey with you at this point because it's way too early is what they'll say or whatever. But what they're saying is, you know, whether it's development or personal development or business development, you're not there, and I'm not looking to, you're too small for me to train up on this kind of thing. Because the angel investing side of it is very, very interesting to me, and I think it's critical to the success of a lot of folks. And I like that younger people are looking at this kind of stuff because it's a better way to think. But we just don't have time to get there. But if folks want to get in touch with you, Jeff, how do they do that?
They can, well, if they shoot an email or contact Let's Talk Business Podcast, I'm happy to be in contact and connected through you guys, through y'all. And I again, one of my passions, business aside, one of my passions is to work with folks on navigating some of the very rocky terrain that is entrepreneurship and business startup. So I think I've done so many coffee chats, I've done so many coaching sessions, mentor sessions, I've done so many back-to-back meetings. Not making a single dime off of it, but it's what I enjoy. It's what I give back. So I'm very open, very happy to field any calls, emails, coffee chats, lunches, whatever. Reach out to Let's Talk Business Podcast. Let them know that you want to engage, and I'm happy to set something up from there.
All right, I love that. And as far as your security company goes, if folks want to get, like, they want to talk to you about maybe getting some security out at their place, where do they go?
They can go to www.security101.com/San Antonio. Or they can come by and knock on our door. We're right next to the AT&T Center. Oh, I'm sorry, the Frost Bank Center. Yeah.
And what's the phone number over there?
It'll be 210-388-3789.
Love it. Thanks, Jeff. Again, thanks for coming in on short notice. Appreciate it. Again, these are my favorite topics to have, so always a pleasure. But that's going to be it for this one. So as we wrap up the show, quick reminder to check out our latest podcast and catch video version of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. It's going to be it for this one. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.